Come on, start the show. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me, Dr. Payne?
Yes.
All right, good evening to you. I hope you're having a good day so far.
Yes.
I want to welcome all of us to FSM, the Daily Digital Show. I trust that we're having a good day so far. And if you're not having a good day, we're here to encourage us in the Lord. And if you're having a good day, I'm asking you to help me and help all of us to encourage someone else. Because when we look at Jesus' ministry, it evolved around these two principles, loving God and loving each other. So we serve God best by taking care of each other. And when we take care of each other in the Lord, then we worship our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So I want to welcome all of us near and far. For those that are tuning in from YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or from TCV FM Christian Radio, Traditional Christian Value. I want to welcome us near and far to FSM Daily Digital Show. Some of our honored guests this evening are Dr. Payne, Dr. Johnson, Attorney Bastien, and also our singing evangelist, Elder Marcel. So I want to welcome us all to FSM Daily Digital Show. First, I'm going to ask you just to bow your head with me while I ask God, the Holy Spirit, to lead us going forward. Good God of heaven, here we are, gathered together to worship you. I pray, oh Father, that you will be with us in a special way. Guide our thoughts, our words, and all that we will do, that will be to your honor and your glory. And Father, for those among us that are sick, I pray, Father, that you may do something for us now. In Jesus' name, amen. First, I want to call upon Elder Marcel to give us a special music. And then after Elder Marcel, we're going to hear from Attorney Bastien. And then after Attorney Bastien, then we will hear from Dr. Payne. Elder Marcel, please.
O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort fraught. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still this God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hands. He leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hands he leadeth me. Lord, I would clasp thy hand in mine, nor ever murmur, nor repine. Content whatever lot I see, since this my God that leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hands. He leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. And when my task on earth is done, when by thy grace the victory's won, in death cold wave I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hands. He leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hands he faithful follower I would be, for by his hands he leadeth me.
Thank you very much, Elder Marcel, reminding us that Jesus himself leaded us. Jesus did not assign an angel to lead us. He didn't assign a man to lead us, but God himself is our leaders. And so by his mighty hands, he leads us. So no matter what you're going through at this moment, you need to reminded, all of us need to reminded that Jesus himself, oh, he's the one who lead us, and the good work that he began in us, if we continue to be faithful to him, he will follow through on his part, because he is the one who will lead in our lives. I hope someone will be blessed by the lyrics of that song. I know I have experienced a blessing. So I want to thank Elder Marcel for that awesome music in his content. At this time also, we're going to call upon Attorney Bastien, and Attorney Bastien going to share a thought with us at this point. Attorney Bastien, please.
It's nice to be here with you guys, and I always miss being here with you guys because for those of you, I know some of you understand that I even feel your prayers sometimes when I'm not there, but I always want to be here. It's just that God allows me to be used in other places, which is a good thing. But I just wanted to point that out to all of you. So I tell you, a lot has been happening in the legal front since we last spoke, and most notably, what's in our hearts and a lot of us is this mass protest of killing that's been going. So while the police protests against the police officers' killings flare across the United States, we got from Minneapolis to Chicago to Portland, but still, all of us are waiting for one thing. I mean, many of us are waiting for the verdict in the trial with the murdering of George Floyd that happened last year. And it's important. It's pivotal because, first of all, you have a police officer that it's always hard to get a conviction against police officers. People are not. They're not prone to do it, and rightfully so, because officers, they're here to protect us, and they sacrifice a lot, and they never know if they're going to get back home. But just like everything else, there's always a rotten apple in everything. And on this one is particularly looked at because of what we spoke about before in the show, and also because of the video that's been shown. So I just want to briefly review with you guys a little bit of, now, for those of you who don't know or have not been following, the trial's over, okay? And the case is in the hands of the jury. So what that means is that we're waiting for a verdict different from a judgment, because a judgment is given by the judge. This is the jury that has to decide. So, and it comes out to the use of force, whether the force was excessive. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And so what did we have? A couple of things. We had the Los Angeles Police Sergeant Jody Steiger. It's a use of force expert who testified. He told the jurors on Tuesday that the former police officer, Derek Chauvin, used excessive force on George Floyd during his arrest. Now, that's what he said. He went on and he explained, but he said, my opinion was that the force was excessive when Mr. Floyd was being placed in the backseat of the vehicle. He was actively resisting, so that at that point the officers were justified. But when he was there, when he placed his position on the ground, he did not have any resistance. And he slowed down, he stopped, and he just did not see any, he thought that the force was excessive. So now, so we're talking about police brutality, so there's a lot going on. So now we have, of course, the defense put on its defense, and for those of you who have watched the trial, The defense was basically one that he could have died. He could have died by Floyd could have died by other means. They brought out his past history of drug use and of addiction, and they tried to say that he was fragile and he was a state that he would have died anyway, you know. And then they tried to say that he had some complication of so many things that even though they were putting the knee was on the neck, that it was more likely he would have died, or that you can't conclude that it's because of the force that was used that he died. So basically that's what they were saying. So they were saying, then you had David Fowler, a former chief examiner of Maryland, who testified in numerous high-profile police cases. He told the jurors that he believed Mr. Floyd died after a combination of factors. He says, including pre-existing heart conditions, drug use, exposure to vehicle exhaust from the police cruiser that he was next to, that caused his heart to stop. And he said, you put all these things together, it's very difficult to say which of those is the most accurate. He said, characterizing Mr. Floyd's cause of death as, and then he said that it was undetermined. So, and then before Dr. Fowler took the stand, Judge Cahill, he allowed an associate of Mr. Floyd to avoid testifying by invoking his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Dr. Fowler, he disputed the idea that the prone position where Mr. Floyd was kept, I remember it was 9.5 minutes, is dangerous. Several experts called by the prosecution said it is well known among police officers that the position can be dangerous for suspects, and that the manner in which Mr. Chauvin had held Mr. Floyd to the ground constituted deadly force. Then you had a couple, there was this medical expert that was called by the Chauvin's team. On the cross-examination on Wednesday, they said that George might have survived if he received immediate medical care. That was another twister that went in there. And they referred to this as the sudden death event. But he was cross-examined, if any of you guys watched it, pretty brutally. And at the end of the day, at least I don't think that he was able to sustain his credibility as much as they were taking. So now, then you had Barry Broad, an expert on the use of force, who was called to testify by the defense also. He said that Mr. Chauvin had been justified in his action, right? That Chauvin is the officer, and that he did not consider the restraint that Mr. Chauvin used, keeping Mr. Floyd pinned under his knee while handcuffed and face down on the street, as use of force. But he did later acknowledge that the restraint did qualify as a use of force under the policies of the Minneapolis Police Department. So what do we have? We have a couple of takeaways. So we have Mr. Broad said that the officers who arrested Mr. Floyd has acted appropriately every step of the way. He said that he felt that Derek Chauvin was justified and was acting with objective reasonableness following Minneapolis Police Department police policy and current standards of law enforcement in his interaction with Mr. Floyd. We talked about what happened during cross-examination. The prosecution and Mr. Broad appeared to view the videos of the arrest from completely different perspectives, if you watched it. On several points, common ground was hard to find. And if you watch the video, Mr. Floyd pinned to the ground, Mr. Broad said that he thought that Mr. Floyd was resisting. I mean, even while he was pinned on the ground. But the prosecutor, though, said Mr. Floyd was riding on the ground because he can't breathe. There was also a woman that the jurors heard from who was with Floyd just before the police officers approached his vehicle. And they saw new body camera footage from Peter Cheng, an employee of the Minneapolis Park Police and a licensed peace officer who responded to the scene of the arrest. Both witnesses provided new insight on Mr. Floyd's condition before he was taken to the police cruiser, eventually pinned down. Now, the woman said Mr. Floyd was happy, normal, talking, alert, while in the Cup Foods convenience store before he was arrested. Ms. Hill said that Mr. Floyd had offered to give her a ride home, and they went to a vehicle together. Mr. Floyd then fell asleep while she took a phone call in the vehicle, she said. Other than being tired, Ms. Hill said that Mr. Floyd seemed normal, okay? Now, her body camera footage was interesting because you could see Mr. Floyd handcuffed and sitting on the street as a police officer asked him for his name, birthday. He answered the officers coherently. He did not try to flee. And the footage could benefit now. And that footage, I would think, would benefit the prosecution. There was also Philanese Floyd, Joy Floyd's brother, who gave tearful testimony about Mr. Floyd as a brother and a son. He talked about how they played video games together when they were children. And the personalities, he was looking at photos, their mother, and he said that he would just say, "Mom, mom, mom," over and over again. And then there was a Jonathan Rich, the cardiologist, who was called to the witness stand by the prosecutors. He said that Mr. Floyd's death was absolutely preventable. And the officers should have immediately begun chest compressions once they failed to find a pulse. Then you also had the guy from the convenience store who actually said, "You know what, I'm so sorry I reported this, because had I known that this would happen like that, I would have never reported. I wouldn't have taken the $20, because it's a $20. What's in question is the $20 of counterfeit money." And he said he never imagined within his dream that this would happen. And as far as the theories that they're trying to bring out, that this guy was sick and all this stuff, he said this guy looked fine to him. So there was definitely police conduct rebuke there. Chief Arando of the police department said Mr. Chauvin absolutely violated the department's policies during the arrest. And he said once Mr. Floyd had stopped resisting, and certainly once he was distressed and trying to verbalize that, that should have stopped. You had other officers, Nicole McKenzie, who trains officers at the Minneapolis. She said that that this was not justified. And you have the pulmonologist who testified fentanyl did not impact George Floyd's breathing. So all in all, it was something else. And we know that that the officer had the option of testifying if he wanted to testify, and he did not end up that he did not testify. He actually did speak, and he said that he would invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege, which, you know what, it's within his right. And if I was him, if it was my client, I don't think I would have put him on the stand either. But so I know what most of you guys are thinking. Attorney Bastien, what do you think is going to happen? You know, I'll tell you this much. In a lot of other ones, I would tell you, I don't know. And since I'm not going to be held to it, it doesn't matter if I'm wrong. But I think if there is a case that there could be a conviction of some count, because, you know, there's more than one count, I think that would be it. I think the defense tried, they work with what they have, but a lot of times in the defense, what you get is, you get, there was some other factor. I was waiting for some other factor. I was waiting for something else other than what we knew. But in all, what we did is we found out that, thank God for the defense that Floyd had some discrepancy with his past, so they were able to bring that. But if the guy didn't have any discrepancies or did not have any medical condition, I don't know what they would have, because it's hard to conduct a video. So I think there's a great chance that I think is going to happen, but you never know. You know, I had a trial where I thought everything was great. It was a civil trial, and I asked the jurors, I said, hey, listen to me. What do you think I did that made me get such a great verdict? And one lady turned around to me and said, I didn't like the way the other attorney cross-examined that witness. I said, huh? I mean, did you listen to all the stuff that I said? So bottom line is, the attorneys that think that their great wits and their great intelligence get them is something. You never know what goes on in that jury box. So that's what I had for you guys today. And unfortunately for us, there are a lot of mass shootings that are happening nowadays. I think we're gonna have to do something. The people that are trying to preserve their right to have weapons are afraid of what's gonna happen, but those others that worry that anybody could get a gun worried as well, because it seems as if this is becoming a real problem. I mean, my feeble mind would say that COVID, depression, and all this other stuff definitely has something to do with it. And we're probably not, that's not the last thing we've seen, but that's me. Anyway, it was a nice being with you guys today, and I'll stick around for a little bit. I do have something a little bit later. That's why I presented first. But thank you for the opportunity to present.
If I may just ask a question, Attorney Bastien, because knowing your schedule, I know
You may ask questions.
Yeah, my first question to you: what, in respect to the evidence of the defense, both the evidence of the prosecutor, which one you believe has the most weight?
If I were a juror, I would think the prosecution had the most weight. And I'm also thinking about it as an attorney, unfortunately for defense, because I know what the defense could have come up with. I mean, this is a major trial. You are getting a lot of notoriety. This is when you pull out the best of the best, man, because this stuff is going to change your life, And I just didn't think that they presented so much, So that makes me think that they didn't have so much to work with.
My other question, I think you would agree with me that this trial is not just George versus Mr. George and his family versus police. I think America entire America character is on trial here, and because this has a global implication. Will you agree with me?
Oh, definitely. There's no doubt. Sometimes, Pastor Barnaby, I might quiver as an attorney, but this one, I tell you, there is a lot riding on this trial, because, as you probably figured out, there are people waiting to protest already in Minneapolis. There are other cities that things happen. For example, if you could see what happened recently in Columbia, South Carolina, right? I don't know if some of you guys saw what there was a video going around, and there was a man that was in the armed forces who there was an African American kid who was passing in front, and he started berating the kid, telling him to get out and to do all this stuff that he doesn't belong here. And the I call him a kid, but he's probably like 23, 24, was saying, what did I do wrong? And the guy kept saying, hey, listen, you don't belong here. You just don't even belong here. And get out of my face. I mean, terrible. But thank God there was a video there. And what happens is that you see the sheriff came out so quick. They had a charge of assault, a battery on this guy quick. He kept going over and over and over because he doesn't want his town to be labeled as the next one there. So it's not only America, everybody's on their guard. And then unfortunately, you got other stuff. You might not think it's related, but you got things like with the stuff that comes out with the Asian community, that you find out that they have been suffering discrimination and other stuff. So this trial is not just about a police officer. It's about how minorities get treated by police officers. And I would venture to say, it's not only America. America gets watched. Even overseas, they're looking at this and wondering what's going to happen. So this trial has great implications. a lot of cities, if you don't know, have started changing some of the blue wall protection that they had. They started chipping away at some of them to hold the police accountable a little bit more. Now, this has a double-edged sword because you want your police to be able to do their job, you know. But because of what's happening, you know, those that take advantage of it, things are changing because of this trial.
Indeed, indeed. I know Attorney Bastien has limited time, so I'm going to pause, and maybe someone in the audience has a question or a statement that they would like to ask. I want to give someone in the audience maybe 2 questions at most, and then Attorney Bastien will have to leave. Anyone in the audience that have a question for Attorney Bastien? Well, if there's no question.
Good evening, Attorney Bastien. Okay. What would you say about the expert witness for the defense? Did you think he helped their case because he had many conflicting statements? You know,
that's an excellent question. People don't understand that, but a lot of times what happens in criminals is that the burden is not like civil. In civil, what you have is you're weighing the evidence. It's a preponderance of the evidence, right? But in the criminal trial, it's you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So what you have to do is try to put some doubt that something other than something happened. And that's what they did, you know? Now, did they put enough doubt that he would get an acquittal? I think, and I've listened to some other experts, think that he might have on some charges, probably not on all of them. But could it have been better? Yeah, it could have been better. They did what they had to do. I just don't know how effective it is. But listen, if there is an acquittal, I got to tell this shows, if there is an acquittal, do not think that the jury probably thought that he was just not guilty at all. You have to think of it that there might have been an element of doubt, okay? How you describe that doubt is how it's defined to that jury and at that time. That's what happens a lot of times. I hope I answered the question.
You know,
yes, thank you.
My final question here. Do you know
Okay.
The race of the jury? Was it all white jury? Was it a mixture? Did they disclose that?
I don't think they disclosed that, but from what I'm thinking, it was a mixed jury. And I tell you, I don't think that the judge would allow an all-white jury, you know. But I don't know the exact makeup of it, you know. But I'm not pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it was not an all-white jury.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. My conclusion of this: if this police get away with this, then every single police will get away with every crime that they commit in this nation. That is my view.
That. We're gonna see. I tell you, next week we're probably gonna have some good talk. You know.
All right. I'm looking forward for you to come back
follow
next
up
week.
on this stuff.
We could talk about it next week. I'm looking forward for that.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. I know you have a busy schedule, so thank you for sharing, for spending some of your time with us this evening. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. At this time, we're going to call upon Dr. Payne, and Dr. Payne is going to give us an update in respect to this COVID-19. Dr. Payne, I think perhaps your device is muted. There you
Okay.
go.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
The global figures for today was 141,861,840, and That went up by 561,302 yesterday. The global debt was 3,029,583, and that went up by 5,770 yesterday. In the United States, the number now is at 32,381,406, and that went up by 9,287 yesterday. And the debts in the US is 580,905, and that went up by 149 yesterday. In New York, the number now is at 2,168,901, and that went up by that did not go up yesterday. The debts in New York was 34,446, and that did not go up yesterday. In Georgia, the number now is at 1,302,241, and that went up. That did not go up yesterday. And the debts in Georgia was 23,955, and that did not go up yesterday. The standings in the world is the United States, India, Brazil, Russia, United Kingdom, Turkey, Italy, Spain, Germany, Poland, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, and Iran. And the numbers for the leading states are, or the top 15 states are California, Texas, Florida, New York, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Ohio, New Jersey, North Carolina, Michigan, Arizona, Tennessee, Indiana, and Massachusetts. And the leading numbers for yesterday for cases was Florida, 6,834, Pennsylvania, 2,843, Illinois, 2,666, Missouri, 2,441, Minnesota, 1,305, Maryland, 1,169, South Carolina, 1,021, Indiana, 956, West Virginia, 370, Maine, 346, Alabama, 270, Mississippi, 157, Vermont, 147, and the District of Columbia, 83. Yes, it was led by Florida with 34, Pennsylvania 25, Virginia 17, Minnesota 15, South Carolina 15, Illinois 10, Indiana 8, West Virginia 5, District of Columbia 1, Montana 1, Maine 1. And the vaccines for yesterday, globally, the number is 894,514,948. And we have given out 209,406,814. So on yesterday, they passed the 200 million goal that Biden had predicted, and that was in 87 days. And yesterday was the 453 day that we've been fighting the coronavirus, and we have another 24 days, which is May 12, 2021, to reach the 70% vaccination rate of herd immunity. Yesterday, we had 60 states that gave out 30%, 60 states gave out 40%, 58 states gave out 50%, 56 gave out 60%, 48 gave out 70%, 25 gave out 80%, 2 gave out 90%, and 1 gave out 100% of its vaccines. In the world, we have 61 countries have given out 10%, 27 have given out 20%, 15 have given out 30%, 8 has given out 40%, 7 has given out 50%, 4 has given out 60%, 1 has given out 100%. And on the military, the federal entities, which is the US military, the Veterans Affairs, the prisons, and the Navajo Nation, they have given out 77.1% of their vaccines. The numbers yesterday is as follows. We had, in the US, we had 9,287 cases, and that brought down to 387 per hour and 6 per minute. The deaths was 149, and that brought down to 6 per hour and 0 per minute. The numbers in the world was 561,302, and that brought down to 23,388 per hour and 390 per minute. And the deaths globally was 5,770, which brought down to 240 per hour and 40 per minute. And looking at the comparison, yesterday we had let me just enlarge this so I can read it. Okay. 35,735 deaths behind the combination of the First World War, the Second World War, and the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And we are 17,133 behind the cancer deaths in the United States, annual cancer deaths in the United States. And we are also 54,385 deaths behind the heart disease deaths per annum. That's my report for today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Payne. I truly appreciate that detailed analysis that you have reported for us. First, I want to highlight the 200 million goal. The Biden administration doubled their first goal. First, they had 100 million in 100 days. Now they exceeded it to 200 million in 100 days. So now they have reached both goals. Is that correct?
Yes, but it's not 100 days, it's only 87 days.
So they accomplished 200 million in 87 days.
Right.
So they have exceeded their expectation, their goal.
Yes, because yesterday they gave nearly 4,000 vaccines, 3,194,240 vaccines yesterday. So they nearly gave 4 million vaccines yesterday.
Wow. So at least in respect to the distribution of the vaccine, we are making progress.
Oh yes, because their original goal was a million vaccines per day. So that's why the 100 days would have been 100 million. But now they're exceeding it, 3,194,240 in one day. Nearly 4 million vaccines in one day. So they're 4 times the amount.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Dr. Payne. Indeed, we appreciate it. We anticipate Dr. Johnson, so we want to check. Dr. Johnson, are you with us? We were anticipating Dr. Johnson, but however, it don't appear as if he's here as yet. But I just want to welcome us near and far for those who are tuning in on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube And also those are tuning in from TCV FM Christian Radio, traditional Christian value. We want to welcome us all to FSM Daily Digital Show. Those are near and those are far. Also those on the Zoom platform as well. Some of our honored guests so far are Dr. Payne and Attorney Bastien. We anticipate Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson should be here in shortly. But with that being said, I want to talk about what you shared with us, and in light of what Dr. Payne, rather Attorney Bastien, has shared us, and I want to like to turn our attention to a passage in Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13, beginning with verse 1, 2, and 3. And I'm reading from the King James Version. And he says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves domination. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but the rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Will thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same." If I may, at this time I heard that our physician is with us, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, I know it's been a rough day for you, a busy day, but we just want to thank you for tuning in with us at this moment. Thank you for joining us. I think you're muted.
Okay, there we are. Yes, Pastor, how are you?
Good. How was your day so far? Should I say, I know it's busy.
Pretty busy.
Yes.
Pretty busy.
I just want to let you
Good
know.
to see you, and good to see the FSM audience today.
Yes.
Very good.
And we appreciate you. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to share some of your expertise with us. We appreciate you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So go ahead and share with us whatever God has laid on your heart to share with us that could benefit us in this rough time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we had discussed and thought would be a good thing would be to actually bring to mind to people the things that predispose and make a person more vulnerable when speaking of COVID or coronavirus. And some of the things, of course, are their age. And so one of the considerations is being at age 50 or older than 65. And then, of course, having diabetes, high blood pressure, or some other metabolic disorder that pulls on your system and pulls the energy away from producing good red blood cells, white blood cells, and even immune antibodies or other type of immune cells. And arthritis in itself can cause a type of anemia, because arthritis can pull on the products that are needed to go forward in the hematopoietic system, so that the person can have an anemia of chronic disorder. And so we think in those terms that things that need to be present and ready to spring into action should be ready, which is all of the nutritional status of the person, his hydration status, and if he is well-toned and has good cardiovascular reserve, and all those things are needed to help us present our immune system to the invading organism, fight it off, neutralize it, and in some way paralyze it until it can be disposed of by our immune systems, macrophages or other agents that clean up the hematopoietic system. The macrophage is like the garbage truck. It comes along and it swallows a little bit more than the garbage truck, because once it engulfs the organism, it's like an incinerator. It also engulfs it, but it destroys it inside the cell by releasing lysozyme, things that break it down to elements. Once the macrophage cell, a type of white blood cell, comes along and wraps itself around the agent. Other ways that our system will neutralize an invading virus is to surround it with pieces of protein that prevent it from being able to reach out and touch the cell wall, because it's surrounded by antibodies which neutralize it. And so we need to be able to produce those antibodies, these pieces of protein that will just stick onto and surround and make a big ball around the virus and prevent it from being able to reach its destination. Once it gets to its destination, prevent it from touching the receptor sites. And then once it's in that condition, along comes the garbage truck, the macrophage, wraps itself around the whole complex, releases lysozymes on it, and completely degrades it to elemental state where it is no longer a virus. And so those are the things that we need to, in order to keep your immune system in that shape so that it can do this kind of thing to a virus. We need to have plenty of nutrition so that we need to keep the highways repaired. The highways are the basement membranes of the vascular system. So if they're disrupted, or the mucosa of the nose, the pharynx, the nasopharynx, the lung tissue is not repaired, then we can get disruption and poor movement of those macrophages down the highway, or those red blood cells that we need to travel that highway, or the white blood cells that we need to travel that highway, whether they be lymphocytes, neutrophils, or monocytes. And so what we find is that we need some vitamin C. Vitamin C keeps the basement membranes repaired in our body. And that's one of the things that when we talk about Linus Pauling, who believed that we should have a lot of vitamin C, mega doses of it to keep us in a good, healthy state. He wasn't too far off, because maybe he knew that vitamin C, ascorbic acid, hydroxylates proline and lysine hydroxylates, which are the basic molecules that are needed to repair the basic proteins in connective tissue. Lysine and proline hydroxylase and lysine hydroxylase are charged up by vitamin C. And so I would say to a person, make sure you got enough vitamin C in the food that you're eating. Red bell peppers have more vitamin C than oranges, and oranges have more than lemons have more vitamin C than oranges, and so forth. There are a lot of citric fruits that have vitamin C, and so as you go up the ladder toward red bell pepper, you end up with a lot of vitamin C and red bell peppers. If the people are taking nutritional supplements, 500 milligrams a day of vitamin C would be helpful. And what does it do? It keeps the basement membranes repaired. And the nose, you can feel it because you don't have the inflammation, the broken highways, the broken basement membranes there allow inflammation to maintain and stay there, and nasal congestion and mucosal swelling, and the nose is stopped up most of the time and full of mucus because white cells are trying to get across the broken bridges and broken highways and the broken up basement membrane to do their job, but they just can't move in and out very well. Next, vitamin D. Vitamin D used to be thought of as a vitamin, and I suggest that people take during the coronavirus about 2,000 Afro-Americans, anybody with skin of color seem to do better when they have vitamin D supplements. And the reason is that before this coronavirus ever hit, for years there had been a silent epidemic of vitamin D deficiency in people of color. Okay, and the reason is because the more melanin they have, the more blockage of the sunlight getting up under the skin, doing its part to produce vitamin D internally. Vitamin D starts out as the backbone. Its backbone is a cholesterol molecule. And that is a like 4 hexagon kind of structure. The 4 hexagons stuck together in a certain fashion, and 2 points on that structure have to be hydroxylated so that the vitamin D is activated. And for it to get to its very active form, vitamin D3, which it has, its final step is passing through the kidney, where under the stimulation of PTH, because PTH, parathyroid hormone, is a hormone that comes out of those little parathyroid glands to help bring calcium levels up in the blood. So when calcium levels are low, the body senses it, and up comes the PTH. PTH then stimulates the production of vitamin D and hydroxylation of the vitamin D molecule at one of the points. It's hydroxylated at 2 points. I can't remember right now, but 1 hydroxylase and 25. So 125 hydroxycholecalciferol is activated form. And so if a kidney is activated, you can take D2, and vitamin D2 will be then activated to vitamin D3 at the kidney. Okay, but if your kidneys are not working well, then you probably need to take vitamin D3 to bypass the kidney, take the product that the kidney would help to produce if it were working well. So you take vitamin D3. But if your kidneys are working well, there's no need for you to be concerned about which one to take. Vitamin D2 would work just as well as vitamin D3. So vitamin D brings, its job is to bring, we thought, to bring calcium from the gut into the bloodstream. And so it was known as a vitamin. It would help calcium get across the GI tract, the intestines, and into the blood. Okay. And if it wasn't there, then the calcium can't enter into the bloodstream as well from the food that we're eating. There's a lot of calcium in a leaf of kale green. There's more calcium in the leaf of kale green there than there is in a glass of milk that they have pumped with vitamin D. As well as some other vitamins to improve its nutritional quality. So calcium can be found in dark green leafy vegetables as well. If you juice a whole cantaloupe, you can get a lot of calcium out of the skin of the cantaloupe if you juice the skin and all. But at any rate, calcium is in our food in other places other than milk. Vitamin D does a whole lot of things. It's no longer thought to be just a vitamin, it's thought to be a hormone. And one of the 2 things that it does for Afro-Americans is that when they do take it, it tends to help lower the blood pressure if you treat them, if they're deficient. If they're deficient in vitamin D, they have less than 10 units of this vitamin D in the bloodstream per unit of blood, then you know that they're deficient in vitamin D. And if you treat that deficiency by giving them supplemental vitamin D, then you can see things like high blood pressure improve. You can help ward off and prevent congestive heart failure in these people. And some people say it helps to protect against prostate cancer. So we no longer think of it as just a vitamin, but we think of it now as more like a hormone. And there are a long list of things that have been attributed now to the sufficient amounts of vitamin D in your bloodstream. Okay, so let's look at this. So now we said you need vitamin C, vitamin D for people with skin of color, because there's a vitamin D epidemic going on in Afro-Americans and in people with skin of color, Indian, or whatever descent, ethnicity they might be. There may be a vitamin D deficiency that, when treated, will help to give them better protection against a infection with coronavirus. So vitamin D, vitamin C, and then zinc. Zinc is another one. Zinc reportedly helps to prevent the coronavirus from entering into the cell, across the cell wall. How that occurs, I'm not sure, but zinc is one of the things used in the prophylactic supplemental regimen that's advised for you to take. Okay, so that's vitamin D, 2,000 international units a day. Vitamin C, 500 milligrams once or twice a day. And zinc, how much zinc? Well, the doctor has a prescription of 222 milligrams of zinc a day for people who are deficient in it. But if you're not deficient, you may supplement with a smaller amount, something that you can get over the counter at the drugstore. Okay, they may give you a chelated zinc that you may use. So I don't have a recommendation on how much to use of it on a daily basis. I do know that zinc in the past had been associated with helping Afro-American men resist prostate cancer. So here again, the vitamin D and the zinc together were seen to have some effect in protecting against prostate cancer. And so that maybe the deficiency in vitamin D had something to do with it, and the insufficiency of zinc also. And next, I would advise something that's anti-inflammatory, like something that you would get from a nice fresh fruits or fresh vegetables. And that extract is a flavonoid called quercetin. Quercetin, about 500 milligrams once a day, ought to help decrease inflammation in the body, inflammatory states. And sometimes we are running around and we're in an inflammatory state and we don't know it because we could be pre-diabetic. Because pre-diabetics run high insulin levels because they're resistant to it in their muscle cells. They may run those high insulin levels for 15 years before the pancreas poops out and doesn't make a high enough level or maintain a high enough level to keep the blood sugars low. And so these high insulin levels put the body in an inflammatory state and they push obesity. They cause obesity when they're sitting around. So we thought that obesity preceded insulin. And well, it precedes clinical diabetes, but not really insulin resistance, because it's the high insulin levels that cause the patient or the person to become obese. Probably before clinically we see that they are diabetic. Because the day that they clinically become diabetic, we know that the pancreas is just not producing as much insulin as it used to. It's still producing high levels, but not enough. Maybe it dropped just a little bit, and that little bit was enough to let the sugars rise in the bloodstream, cause increased urination, thirst, and deprive the muscle cells of glucose needed. And so the person gets hunger, sensei. They're very hungry, very thirsty. And because they're urinating so much, because the high sugar levels pull all the water out of the body, then they become dehydrated. And that's why they're so thirsty. And eventually they're producing an acid from burning the fats inside the cells rather than the sugar that should have gotten inside the cell. And that fat produces an acid called acetone. And if they're left like that, dehydrated, very concentrated blood, they go into a coma because of the ketones and the acid in the bloodstream, and they're in a diabetic coma. Hopefully, they are screened enough so that doesn't happen. They're caught before they get to that state. Continuing, water is a very important thing that we need to continue to look at. And people who are well hydrated do better when they meet the coronavirus head on. And obviously, these are things that you do, and we've been doing before the vaccinations came on the scene. And I would recommend that you continue to do them, just as we recommend that you continue to wear your face mask and social distance and wash your hands, and at every interval of every event. When you get through with some phenomena, you just wash your hands and can continue to do those things that are personal protective and protective for others as well. Sunshine, getting pretty much enough exercise. Don't sit around and become totally, immobile, muscle stiff, sedentary. Move, get out and do walking in the fresh air. And when you're not around others, of course, you don't have to wear the mask. Deep breathe and walk and take good exercises every day and get your cardiovascular system in motion so that you will have a good transit. Your highways are moving fast to and from the cellular level back to the main pump, the heart, and that you continue to maintain your reserves so that if you have to run around the block, you can rise to the occasion. You don't have to run 10 steps and then stop, run 10 more steps, and you will have your body conditioned. And sitting around worrying is another thing that will help to destroy you and predispose you to the worst outcome if you should happen to come in contact with the coronavirus. And your immune system has to deal with it head on. Now you're sitting there saying, I'm not going to have to do that. I'm getting my vaccination, or I had my set of vaccinations. But I'm telling you that nothing more than what the news is telling you, that you've got your vaccines. We want everybody to get them. But after 6 months to a year, the immunity wears off and you have to be vaccinated again. So there may be intervals where you are not vaccinated. In between these intervals, you must learn and know these things. Now the vaccine buys you time to learn what you should do personally to protect yourself and to protect others. The vaccine protects you from a severity of an infection or an assault or hospitalization or death, but the mask and personal protective equipment and washing their hands and all these kinds of things help to protect others. Two things: protecting yourself and protecting others. Of course, if you find that you have it, how do you find it? By testing. You're going to have to determine. You're going to let every man be persuaded in his own mind, the Bible says in Romans. You must be persuaded that you are convicted on how these things must be taken and acted upon. Okay? If you don't do that and you feel that you want a quick fix, then you're possibly a high risk, because the vaccination, it doesn't mean now you can just abandon all precaution while the pandemic roars out there. You're safe and sound, and it doesn't work like that exactly. And so you're going to continue to have to build your immune system with those things that we talked about. And I didn't say probiotics, but I meant to add that in too, probiotics. And so that's vitamin D, C, zinc, quercetin, and probiotics. And of course, nutrition, eating your meals, fresh fruits and vegetables, beans and grains, nuts and seeds, low on the sodium, since there is a lot of hypertension going on out there. And we've often told you that you don't need a whole lot of salt loaded up in your meals anyway. The average working 150-pound man needs maybe a fourth of a teaspoon. That's 400 milligrams of sodium a day, of salt a day. And that's spread through all of his food, all the kinds of foods he eats. But we know that a lot of foods that are served, processed foods, have more than that just in one serving, in one meal during the day. So take a look at what you're doing. If you cook for yourself and you use fresh fruits or fresh vegetables, fresh frozen or fresh from the market, and beans and grains, and then unsalted nuts and seeds, then you are in control of how much sodium gets into that. Okay? And sodium, reducing and decreasing sodium is the first line of defense against high blood pressure. Okay? Hypertension. Okay. So when the heart squeezes, the blood pressure goes up. When it relaxes, the pressure goes down. So it squeezes the blood into the arms and legs, and it relaxes and it falls. It squeezes it, the pressure goes up, the systolic. It relaxes, it drops down. But before it goes to zero, the heart beats again, because the heart is beating on an electrical rhythm. So it goes like that. And the pressure goes up 120 over 80, 120 over 80. How high it goes when the heart squeezes all the blood out, how low it falls before the heart kicks in again and pushes more blood into the vascular system, into the arms and legs. Normally, that stays about 120 over 80. Now, you can, when it gets to 130 over 80, 130 over 80, 130 over 80, then you're in prehypertension. And when it reaches 140 over 90, 140 over 90, that's when damage begins in the blood vessels in the head, brains, and eyes, and the kidney. And the heart muscle starts to overwork and get enlarged and is heading toward congestive heart failure. One great cardiologist said 5 years of untreated hypertension can cause a susceptible person to wind up with congestive heart failure in 5 years of untreated high blood pressure. So we wanted the first line is that not everybody is sodium sensitive, but because so many are, and Afro-Americans outweigh the general populace in the percentage. 50% of us have high blood pressure, or will have it by the time we're 90 years old if we live that long. As with our counterpart, our white counterpart, they only have maybe 25% of the people with high blood pressure, okay? So we make up a great percentage of people who have high blood pressure in this country. We're salt sensitive. There are some theories why we may be sodium sensitive, and that is maybe it has something to do with aldosterone, a hormone from the kidney, adrenal gland that sits on top of the kidney, which causes the conservation of sodium so that it takes a little sodium and holds the pressure up in our system. Some theorize that when the Afro-Americans were brought over on the slave ships, that many of us were vomiting and had dysentery and diarrhea and vomiting, became dehydrated, and many of us died. But the ones that did not die had a high amount of aldosterone in their bloodstream. Well, when they hit these shores and the man with the genes for high aldosterone met the woman with genes for high aldosterone, they lived and they had kids. Now, in this country, and first eating a vegetarian diet, not very much meat, then we made it okay. But then as soon as we started to get the taste for salt in our food, like the smoked pork from the South, and they put it in those smokehouses and the smoke would cure it. And it had a lot of salt. It had to be put in a lot of salt to preserve it before they had ice boxes. Then they had ice boxes with ice cube in it. They put the meat in there. But the people already developed a taste for salt, especially in their food. And that's why they loved salt pork. It was saturated in sodium to keep it in the beginning, to keep the meat from rotting. So that's why how they developed a taste like this over the years. Now, salt is one thing. We push back and say, don't put salt on your food, because salt will do what? Sodium will, if you have that gene, but we don't know that. That's just a theory of why we have so much high blood pressure, and why salt, a piece of salt pork, and why many Afro-Americans in the intensive care unit with uncontrolled pressures. But I say to you, don't take in and add salt to your food, okay? Use Mrs. Dash. Get to learn how to use garlic and cayenne pepper and other seasonings that are not sodium based for your food. And by the way, cayenne pepper and some garlic will help to bring the pressure down. Garlic does work, parsley, chewing parsley also. Eat the kind of diet where you can have a Mediterranean type of diet with cold pressed extra virgin olive oil in your food. And those polyphenols help to improve your cardiovascular system. So what kind of foods don't have salt in them that you should be aware of, so you won't take them in unknowing, thinking that, well, it doesn't have salt. That would be like cheese. See, when I was a kid, a block of cheese on the table would turn green in about 3 days and it'd be half eaten by mice or whatever. On today, you can leave a block of cheese out and nothing will touch it and nothing will grow in it for a month because they have that other stuff in it, sodium propionate. And sodium in the cheese will run your pressure up. What about ice cream? Ice cream, the creamier, you like creamy ice cream from the pumps, Dairy Queen, the creamier it is, the more gum sodium alginate it has in it. And sodium will run your pressure up. How about red meat? Like a nice steak, especially if it's red. You ever see one that's so red, the bone is red in the grocery store? And you wonder, why is the bone so red? Looks like somebody put it in dye. You're not too far off. They sprinkled it with sodium nitrate and it binds to the blood cells and turns it bright red. And the sodium nitrate will run your pressure up. Sodium nitrate was known as saltpeter. They used it in the army to calm the men's natures down when the soldiers were first taken in. That's what they called saltpeter. But sodium nitrate, the sodium in it will run your pressure up. Here's another one that's going to surprise you. You like cookies, pies, cakes, and bread? They're all made with baking powder and baking soda, which is sodium bicarb. And the sodium will run your pressure up. Quick cook cereals use sodium bisulfite, which makes them cook in a half a minute. If you take the long cooked cereals, you will avoid the sodium bisulfite. Black olives that are pitted are soaked in sodium hydroxide to loosen them up so they can get the pit out. And there's sodium in that, not salt, sodium hydroxide. So there are many things that could go on that are foods that have sodium in them that we need to avoid. So the best way is to fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, beans and grains, nuts and seeds. And so this is the SALT talk, avoid the sodium, which is the first step in the treatment of diagnosed hypertension. Hypertension is what? It's the pressure, the point at which the pressure that's generated by the heart pushing the blood out is at a high enough level to start injuring the small arteries and blood vessels of the eyes and the organs of the body, such as the kidney and the brain, and cause overworking of the heart. So that the first sign of this silent killer may be nothing. You may not feel anything until the day that you have a stroke or congestive heart failure. We can talk about that at some other time. But these are some of the things. Diabetes is one of the things metabolically. Why do they tell you that? Because with diabetes, the blood cells don't function. They move slow. The immune cells, the immunity of a person with diabetes is less than the immune proficiency of somebody who is normal. So infections take over, and it's harder for the body to get rid of infections, especially in the feet. You've heard about diabetic foot ulcers and being amputated. And so one of the reasons is because of the glycosylation of all of the basement membranes, and the cells move real slow and they can't do their job very well. But let's go forward. We talked about nutrition. You must eat small meals, 4 hours, 5 hours apart. Give your stomach a chance to rest between meals. You're sitting in the house, you're on quarantine. Don't eat. Give yourself 4 hours, 5 hours between meals. Don't drink your water and eat your meal at the same time. Do your water, finish it an hour before your meal so that you'll have strong digestive juices to do a concentrated job. And don't dilute them with some kind of drink while you're eating. You may drink again 2 hours after you have finished eating a vegetable-based diet, maybe 3 hours if you're eating a meat, a fat, and sugar diet, because you want time for the stomach to finish its job before you pour that water down there. But yes, you must get water. 2 glasses before, 2 glasses in between lunch and breakfast and lunch, 2 glasses maybe between lunch and dinner, and then maybe a glass or 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed. Don't eat your food within 3 hours of going to bed. Your stomach will still be working all night while you're sleeping, and you'll be tired in the morning. Okay? So finish your first meal early. Anxiety. Do not fear and worry about something you have no control over. Put it in God's hand. Let God take care of it. because that stress will cause you to have a poor physical system. It was thought that if you lived in a loving environment, your frontal cortex would grow. And so that they did was they did an experiment in Pittsburgh, and they took an MRI picture of the person's brain before they put him to work and put him in a special environment that had loving and care. And in the environment, he was volunteering his work. So already he felt an elevated sense of a good being, of connection with God. And he did that work, and people commented and were appreciative for 30 days. When they took a picture of the brain again, this frontal cortex had grown a little bit, tiny bit. But they kept taking pictures every 30 days, and it kept getting bigger. That is good. What did it do? It sends signals to the fear center, the amygdala, at the base of the brain, near the primitive part of the brain. That amygdala is a fear center for flight and fight. It always gets you in a tense state, getting ready for something to happen. And the amygdala is firing all the time. And in people under stress, people who worry or have a lot of fear, this thing interferes with their signaling. Pancreas can't see the muscles, how much sugar they need. So the insulin is always being pumped out of the pancreas because their cell signaling is poor because of interference with the amygdala. And so the person has diabetes, and the fear causes the cortisol levels to run high all the time, and stress, and the epinephrine is out there sometimes. And so the person has hypertension, okay? And then the increase in diabetes, we say, causes obesity. And obesity is a risk factor for cancer. And in the meantime, the person is depressed, and they're sad, and they're not doing the things that they could do if they had a positive mental attitude. And so they start to trust in things. When they hear something going wrong on the news, they're trusting in science and man only. Then they start to fear, and fear takes over. And as a result, it seems to be this is the source for everything. But as this frontal cortex grew, and this man lived in this loving environment, his sense of fear began to decrease. The frontal cortex began to send signals to shut down the activity of the amygdala until finally cut it off. What do you think happened? The blood pressures came back to normal, blood sugars came back to normal, the obesity kind of went away. They came with a happy mental attitude. 1 John 4:18 tells us, perfect love cast out all fear. Amazing, huh? So keep a mental attitude that's positive. And Isaiah said, thou will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Who is thee? God. The loving God, the loving Father, the loving Shepherd. What he's done for us in the past, he'll do even more in the future. So we should relax because we're in good hands with God, our Father, our Heavenly Father.
Amen.
And in prayer and in trust, he will walk you through this epidemic just like he walked Peter on the water. Thank you, my friends, for listening.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I truly appreciate that. You know, folks, we have been so blessed. We have Attorney Bastien, who give us a legal analysis of what's going on, in particular on the Mr. George Floyd case. Also, we have Dr. Payne, our scientist, who will give us analysis on the COVID-19. And now we have Dr. Johnson, a physician, who will give us an overall view. He dealt with the coronavirus, he dealt with vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc. And what I appreciate about what Dr. Johnson has done, he shared with us that perfect love casts out all fear. when we put God in the center, and it reminds me of our favorite text here, that first we were created in the image of God. And if you notice, just trust God is good for our health. It's one thing to hear from a preacher or a layperson, but when you hear it from a physician, one who studied the body and could speak from a medical perspective, affirm rather that the Bible is reliable, it's trustworthy, and it is so awesome. Before, I know the time is at hand, but is there a question from someone in the audience that you would like to ask? Attorney Bastien is no longer with us because he has another meeting, but we have Dr. Johnson and we have also Dr. Payne. Is there a question from anyone in the audience?
Yes, I just wondered if Dr. Johnson would review, if he will, the work of the amygdala.
Dr. Johnson.
Okay, yeah. Well, the amygdala is a protective center, because if we need to, some people say without fear you couldn't exist, but I guess they don't know what it's like to live in perfect love. But in perfect love, you trust and you obey before you fear. You fear the one who is the lawgiver, and you never have to fear the consequence of sin or of the punishment. And that's what's wrong with a lot of us. We fear the punishment and not the lawgiver, not the creator. And so the amygdala's job is to remind us that a stove is hot. So when we come near it, we will avoid it. It is to remind us when something as in the past or that we may know of is dangerous, to avoid it. It helps with avoidance, and it helps to keep us on alert in unfamiliar surroundings. So the amygdala is thought to be one of the portions of the primitive brain in the lower part of the brain. So it's a fear center that puts you on alert, for flight, for fight, for self-preservation, if it might be thought of like that in a sinful world.
And I was interested in how it relates to or can somehow control hypertension, and I guess having no fear would be a part of that, right?
Stress, yeah, you stress and fear and anxiety. Anxiety is a type of fear, the fear of not knowing what's going to happen next. Okay, and can you see that? Anxiety, yeah. Fear of not knowing. But do we know what's going to happen next if we trust in the Word of God? It's kind of told us the story. The end of the story is good, right?
Right.
But for the person who doesn't believe in the Bible, they don't know that the end of the story with no hope, a hopeless death. That is a fear that can overwhelm and take people right out, especially in this coronavirus. I had an incident when a young man went to the fear can also put images in your mind, dreams in your mind. And then when that happens, these dreams and things become real, even though they're not, they're imaginary. And they see thousands of caskets going in the ground as a result of coronavirus. And they don't remember history because they haven't read history before. They haven't read about smallpox. They haven't read about the flu. And I just say the flu, but they said the Spanish flu. But it didn't really come in Spain. And Spain was a place where they probably recognize it more often, but it was worldwide. It was a pandemic. So they've not considered these things in the past. And so to them, this whole thing seemed just so horrible and unimaginable. and that it's going to probably happen to them, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it, but maybe a vaccination can help me if I could get the vaccination. And so sometimes they're unrealistic on the healthcare profession, and man, they
Dr. Johnson,
unrealistic.
Facebook and YouTube, Twitter, and also those who are tuning in from TCV FM Christian Radio. We want to thank you for joining us this evening. We were blessed this evening to have Attorney Bastien as our honored guest, Dr. Payne, our scientist, and also legal issue. We talk about scientific issue. We talk about medical issue. At the center of it all, we focus on Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ is the world's greater redeemer, sustainer, and is coming back as Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And as you listen to Dr. Johnson, while he's a physician, he's a Christian, and he based his thought on the Bible. In fact, he said that perfect love casts out all fear. So I hope that you will attach yourself to Jesus Christ, and whatever position you find yourself in, Jesus Christ will see you through. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in with us this evening, and we're looking forward for you to join us tomorrow again at